So I'd like to call the meeting to order. And due to the ongoing COVID-19 pandemic, in accordance with Chapter 22 of the Acts of 22, suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, OML, public bodies otherwise governed by the OML are temporarily relieved from the requirement that meetings be held in public places, open and physically accessible to the public, so long as the measures are taken to ensure public access to the body's deliberations, quote, through adequate alternative means. This meeting will be live on Zoom. The public may participate remotely by joining Zoom, meeting ID number 857-9728-7177, or by calling 312-626-6799. For additional information about remote participation, please contact Carly Antonellis, Assistant Town Manager, at atm@ayer.ma.us or 978-772-8220, extension 100, prior to the meeting. First order of business tonight is the approval of the agenda.
Make a motion to approve the agenda.
Second.
All right, I'm going to do something a little bit different tonight. I'm going to call roll, and I'll just do it alphabetically. So I'll start with Ron DiFilippo.
Ron DiFilippo, aye.
John Ellis.
Aye.
And Jessica Gino.
Aye.
Okay. Next item on the agenda is the public hearing application for a variance, Nasoya Foods USA LLC. The Ayer ZBA, oh, I'm sorry. Can I get a motion to open the public hearing?
You can just open it as chair.
Then I open this public hearing. The Ayer ZBA will conduct a remote public hearing at 6 p.m. on Wednesday, November 16th, 2022, regarding an application by Nasoya Foods USA LLC for property located at 1 New England Way, Ayer, Mass. The applicant is seeking a variance pursuant to Ayer zoning bylaw section 6.2 to allow for the construction of a portion of a building to a height of 75 feet where 40 feet is allowed. For Zoom call information, please contact S. Benoit at ayer.ma.us or 978-772-8220, extension 114. And this was advertised on November 2nd, 2022 and November 9th, 2022 in the Lowell Sun. Do we have representatives for Nasoya Foods on the Zoom call?
Good evening, board members. Tom Gibbons, representing Nasoya Foods. So, board members, I was notified today that Sam Goodwin would not be in attendance at the meeting tonight. And as you know, with a variance, we need 4 out of 5 votes. And so we're asking that the hearing be continued with the hope that at the next meeting, there will be 5 members present. And I had an additional request, wondering if there was any chance that there might be a meeting held prior to the next meeting of December 21st, possibly on November 30th or December 7th. If that's a possibility for the board.
Carly, I'll throw that to you.
Yeah, so Mr. Chairman, we may be meeting again, Attorney Gibbons, depending on how the 40B discussion goes. I don't want to wait another whole 30 days between now and then to, continue the 40B discussion if, we're coming up on the deadline. So if we can, we'd have to know right now, though, I guess.
We would. Well, let's throw it to the board first. But
yeah,
is everybody available?
Yep.
What date? Again, make that clear, please.
November 30th at 6 p.m.
Okay.
December 7th.
Huh?
That's
Or December 7th, I mean, is another possibility, but November 30th would be great for Nasoya.
That works for me. John, how about you?
Sure.
Okay. So it works for the 4 of us, but we're just waiting on Sam, and we'll have to get back to you on that.
Well, let's just proceed forward with the date, regardless, because when we continue it, we have to continue it to a date and time certain. So, I would, we'll plan to meet on the 30th, and that way, also, if we need to meet for the 40B, we have the agenda. So, if someone wants to make a motion to continue the public hearing till November 30th, at 6:00 p.m., we can certainly do that. And it's going to be via Zoom.
To be what?
Via
Zoom?
Zoom. It'll be on
Okay.
Zoom.
I make a motion that we continue the ZBA meeting regarding the Sawyer Foods until November 30th at 6 p.m. via Zoom.
Second.
Okay. Ron DiFilippo,
Aye.
John Ellis,
Aye.
Jessica Gino,
Aye.
and Mike Gibbons, aye. All right.
Thank you
Thank
very
you,
much. I
Attorney
appreciate-
Gibbons.
Appreciate that.
The next item on our agenda is a public hearing application for variance. Jeffrey E. Greco and Andrea L. Greco, 37 Sandy Pond Road. And yes,
Not to be a stickler, but I think that's a 6:10 meeting and we're not quite there.
okay. That being the case, then, if it's all right with everybody, I'd like to take an item out of order. The approval of the meeting minutes. Has everybody had a chance to take a look at them?
Yes, I have.
Okay. Anybody have any issues with them?
Nope. I'll make a motion to accept the minutes for October 19th, 2022 as written.
Second.
Ron DiFilippo?
Okay, then that's the second first, right?
Yep.
Just to be. It's a second and an aye, if that I can do both things.
Great. John Ellis
Aye.
and Jessica Gino.
Aye.
All right. We still have 3 minutes until.
And I think you have to say, and the chair says aye.
Oh, Mike Gibbons, aye. See, I'm so out of sorts here.
Yeah.
I like playing second fiddle. All right, guys. So we still have about 3 minutes until we can kick off this next public hearing.
Actually, only 2 minutes by my iPhone.
My computer agrees.
Need some of that Jeopardy music or something like that.
Cindy, could you get on that, please?
Da, da, da.
Even better.
No.
That queued up for all meetings from now on.
Thank you.
Oh,
Yes. We have an opening at 19.
oh.
Yep.
Come on.
All right. Well,
Almost.
Still got 30 seconds.
yeah. I could replay it, but I think you get the point.
No,
Oh,
No.
good, thanks.
that was good. I've got 6:10.
Mhm.
Caesar.
It being 6:10, I'd like to open the public hearing for an application for a variance for Jeffrey E. Greco and Andrea L. Greco, 37 Sandy Pond Road, filed October 28th, 2022. The Ayer Zoning Board of Appeals will conduct a remote public hearing at 6:10 p.m. on Wednesday, November 16th, 2022, regarding an application by Jeffrey E. Greco and Andrea L. Greco for property located at 37 Sandy Pond Road, Ayer, Mass. The applicant is seeking a variance pursuant to Ayer Zoning Bylaw, Section 5.2.1.1, Section 6.2 and 6.3b, to allow for an existing single-family home to remain on the property located at 37 Sandy Pond Road until a new single-family home to be constructed on the property is complete, with the condition that the existing single-family home shall be removed prior to the issuance of an occupancy permit by the Town of Ayer building inspector for the to-be-constructed single-family home. For Zoom/call-in information, please contact espanoid@ayer.ma.us or 978-772-8220, extension 114. And this was advertised on November 2nd, 2022 and November 9th, 2022 in the Lowell Sun. And Attorney Gibbons, I think you have this one as well.
Thank you. Good evening, board members. Tom Gibbons, and I represent Jeffrey and Andrea Greco, the owners of 37 Sandy Pond Road here in Ayer. The board is likely to remember that on February 16th of 2022, this board had granted a variance to the Grecos to construct a new home on the lot. The lot has less than the required frontage, so the variance was required. The board granted that variance because the new home will comply with all setback requirements, whereas the existing home does not. When that application was filed, the Grecos were of the understanding that they would be able to leave the existing house there and continued occupancy of it during construction. At the last hearing, the issue came up, and the engineer had responded that if Charlie required the existing house to be removed prior to commencement of construction of the new home, then that's what would happen. The Grecos were attending that meeting via Zoom, and they're here tonight, and they didn't fully appreciate that statement. And after the variance was granted, Charlie Schultz informed them that without ZBA approval, in fact, the existing house would need to be demolished prior to the commencement of the construction of the new house. So this variance would be limited in time. It would allow the existing house to remain there until the new house is constructed, but would have to be demolished prior to the issuance of the occupancy certificate for the new home. If the variance was not granted, the Grecos do have a number of hardships as required for a variance. And first and foremost is that the water and sewer line that serves the existing home also serves the three-family next door. And you may remember that this lot was created through the A&R process under an exemption that is allowed where you have more than one structure on a lot that predates zoning. So the water and sewer line runs through the basement of the existing house and then shoots to the right to the three-family. So if they weren't granted this variance, one of the hardships they would have is that they would need to relocate that water and sewer line now, and then also run a new line to the new home when it's constructed. So that would result in additional cost and work for the Grecos. The existing home is currently occupied by their son and his family. And if this variance is not granted, then they would have to move earlier than they had anticipated. If you were to grant the variance, it's my opinion that the variance can be granted without substantial detriment to the public good. In fact, granting the variance would allow the current occupants to remain in there for a longer period of time. In addition, where the existing house is located, it will shield the construction of the new home from view of Sandy Pond. That may not be the most important thing, but in fact, it does shield it from view. In my opinion, granting the variance will not derogate from the intent and purpose of the bylaw because there will never be two occupied homes on that site. Prior to the issuance of the occupancy permit for the new home, the existing home would have to be torn down. Now, I did review the comments from all of the department heads. Most of them were either no comment or no issue. The town planner's comment was acceptable given the circumstances. However, Charlie Schultz is of the opinion that the variance should not be granted because his concern is that if the new house is not constructed then, or is only partially constructed, then the town is stuck with two homes on one lot. I honestly believe that the chances of that are highly unlikely. I think the possibilities are, number one, that the new home is never constructed. And if that's the case, the original variance and this variance would lapse, it would expire. The second possibility is that the new home is either partially or fully constructed, and then the existing home is not demolished. I think the chances of that are so slim for a number of reasons. The Grecos will either get a construction loan or use their own funding to construct the new home. Once that process starts, it just would not make sense for anybody not to complete it because, again, you wouldn't get the occupancy permit until the existing home was demolished. However, in the unlikely event that that was to happen, then the zoning enforcement officer could take an enforcement action like any other zoning violation. I liken this to the fact that if the existing house had burnt down, I believe that the Grecos or any other homeowner in that situation could have a temporary mobile home on the lot while they construct the new home, you know, to allow whoever's living there to live there during the construction period. In that case, I think the risk is the same, and again, highly unlikely that someone can construct a new home and not remove the temporary mobile home from the lot. And if that were the case, then the zoning enforcement officer would take an enforcement action just like he would in any other zoning violation situation. You know, and the final point, going back to that water and sewer issue, is that once the new home is constructed, the existing home has to come down because the water and sewer line enters into that basement of the existing home, and then a portion or an arm of it goes to the right to the three-family. So once the home is constructed, in order to relocate the water and sewer lines, that house has to come down. So I request that you do grant the variance. I think that it being temporary in nature, which you have the authority to do, it's a reasonable request.
Thank you, Attorney Gibbons. So what I'll do first is I've got at least a couple questions, and then I'll ask the board for their comments, and then any members of the public who'd like to speak on the application, I'd invite to do that. But when I was looking at this, and we did receive a letter from Mr. Kennard referencing a right-of-way issue. Is that correct?
Yeah, the reason I submitted that was one thought I had is that, you know, a board member might have a concern that how will you do the construction in the back of the lot while the existing house is there. So Mr. Kennard owns the property right next door to the right if you're standing in the road looking at the property. And so he's willing to let them access through his property. But more importantly, and I didn't appreciate this until I did a site visit myself, is at the end of McDowell Street, there is a right-of-way that crosses over our property. And you see that on the plan that I submitted, 40-foot right-of-way.
Yep. And
so when I went down McDowell Street, that's very easily accessible. I think maybe, I don't know if the railroad passes cars down there, but it's a clearly worn 40-foot wide right-of-way. So in reality, they can access through that route to get construction materials and equipment. So that was the reason for the Kennard letter, just in case there was an issue or concern about how access was going to be had during construction.
Okay. Yeah, that was certainly one of my concerns. So the other concern that, if I'm being honest, that I have is that, you know, I can see where Charlie's coming from, and what I wouldn't want to see in something with something like this is that first home becomes a storage unit. You know, and I understand that we wouldn't issue an occupancy permit until it's demolished. But, you know, I don't want to see two homes on that lot, you know, for an extended period of time. So when would the Grecos be planning to begin construction? Do they have a timeline for when they'd like to do that?
So construction would start within 6 months. And Jeff and Andrea, if you have anything to say on the timing of that.
So we plan on breaking ground end of March or April, and we'd like to be in by this time next year.
Okay. All right. Well, I appreciate that. I think those are the questions that I have up front. So at this point, I'd ask any of the board members if they have any questions, comments, or concerns.
Could we put into an approval condition that the existing house does not get used for storage? deal with your worry, Mike?
So it would. I think if we were going to do anything like that, if we were going to condition the granting of a variance, I might prefer to do something like, put a timeline on the variance where it and if this is allowable, that it expire on, I know they have 2 years to do this project, but say, May 1st, 2024, right? Give them a little bit of time or sooner if the board would feel
Mr.
comfortable
Chair.
with that. Yes.
So the variance will, I believe expires after a year.
Oh, okay, great.
That's just, as long as they start work within a year, it doesn't have to be complete within a year, the way I understand it.
Right, correct.
Right, a shovel in the ground.
Right. And they're thinking of doing that in the spring anyway. So it's more of a matter of what kind of guarantee can we get that house will be taken down. I mean, I know there's a condition of occupancy and all that, but that really, we don't have any power to enforce that house being taken down.
Right. That's, go ahead, Mr. Gibbons.
Yeah. So I think the condition that the occupancy permit for the new home would not be issued until this one is demolished does that, but certainly wouldn't object to bootstrapping that with a reasonable date. And again, this would only, the expiration date would only apply assuming the new home is constructed. And certainly that's 100% the Greco's intention, but we all know that if for some reason construction never commenced, then both variances would simply lapse.
Right. Ron, what do you think? Oh, I'm sorry, John.
We're saying that upon completion of the build, they have X amount of time to demolish the other one. Is that what we're saying?
Well, we could condition it, I believe, again. We could put a timeline on this variance, right? So we could say, if we wanted to grant it, grant the variance to the Grecos, and it could expire on, May 1st, 2024, right? So it would give them all of next year for construction, and then, through the winter and into the early spring of 24 to complete. And then it would be null and void. But, part of me thinks if they're going to start construction this coming spring, you could build a McMansion in 8 months. So it would be my hope that they would get this done and we wouldn't need to do that. But, that was my only concern, again, is that I don't want that front house sitting there for 2-3 years.
That's the white one by the street?
Yeah.
No.
The gray one.
It's gray.
Oh, it's gray. Well, it looks white.
The white one's the apartment building.
What's that?
The white one is the apartment building. It's a 3-family home. That one's staying.
How many buildings are on that property?
Just one. We subdivided it. It's just one.
White building, Mr. Ellis, is the 3-family that I mentioned, and that's not on the same lot any longer.
So that gray or / white house real close to the street is not the one that's coming down?
Correct.
Well,
it would come down eventually.
It's the single family house that we're talking about, which is gray, maybe appears white.
It's got burgundy shutters.
Yeah, I know. The one right in the driveway there.
Correct. Yes, that's the one that's going to come down.
So you're not showing the other house?
Correct. It's on lot 1.
So that's the other thing. Is this 2 pieces of property or is this 1 piece of property?
The locus that we're talking about is lot 2. And lot 1 is a lot that was subdivided. And I know that Kevin Conover had gone through through this. The reason the Grecos were before you in February was a result of the fact that they separated these two structures onto two separate lots, which they have a right to do under the state statute. And when they decided to remove the existing house on lot 2 and move it back on the lot, they had to get a variance from this board because frontage was only, I can't see, but 62.89 feet, I think. So the other 3 family really has nothing to do with this application.
So on this drawing where you do see that little chunk of lot 1, the 3 family continues beyond what we're seeing in that diagram, right?
No.
Or
fully on that lot.
It's fully on that lot?
Right.
Okay.
Ron, what do you think about this?
Shit, this is crazy. So how did you get lot 1 so close to the existing house? How could that be subdivided? You know, it just seems like this. No. Seems like I'm just curious. Tell me. I don't know.
So I had watched the February meeting, and as I say, this has nothing to do with the current application, but there is a statute that says when you have 2 structures on a single lot that predate zoning, you're allowed to subdivide those, and you don't have to meet current requirements, as Kevin Conover had gone over, and Charlie, I think Charlie Schultz had spoke up about his research at the time. So that was done and didn't require any variances. The reason a variance was required in February is because if you change anything on one of these lots that you create, you do need a variance if you have some nonconformity, which is the frontage. So the way the 3 family was created on lot 1 was under the state statute, and the planning board endorsed that plan as they're required to under the statute. But in reality, you know, it doesn't have anything to do with this application. You know, this is based on the fact that the Grecos honestly believed that they could leave this house up and occupied until the new one was complete. And again, I liken it to if there was a fire, I think they could, you know, someone would put a temporary mobile home on there while they reconstructed their home. And I think it's similar situation. It's just allowing the existing occupants to stay there while the new house is constructed.
So
I get your last, but I guess. Go ahead, whoever it is.
Once this new house is up and the existing home is gone, is it fully in conformance to all setbacks and frontage and everything else?
The new home will meet all of the setback requirements, but the frontage won't change, which is the variance that you had granted previously. So it'll rely on the variance that was granted for the reduced frontage.
And that's what we had done back in February, John, is we discussed the frontage for this lot. And I think even at the time that we looked at this proposed house was maybe even mentioned by Kevin Conover. We weren't discussing it that night, but you know, for some reason this drawing looks familiar from when we would have considered it in the past.
It is the same drawing, and the whole reason for the variance in February was in order to construct this proposed house in the location shown on this plan with reduced frontage. So that variance has been granted, and our request tonight is simply to allow the existing home to remain on the lot and be occupied until the new house is constructed. Again, with the condition that Charlie will not issue an occupancy permit for the new home until the existing home is demolished.
So the new home is going to be behind that house?
It'll be on where it's proposed house on the plan. That's where it will be.
Yeah.
But yes, John.
Okay.
Jess, what are your thoughts?
If I may, I assure you that'll be our front lawn, and that is the last thing we want to be looking at from our front windows. We assure you that house will come down.
And it will be a wonderful improvement to Sandy Pond Road. What we're going to build versus what's there now is going to be very nice to drive by and take a look at. You will not see it if the house that's there now remains. And we want to have, that's why we're doing this. We don't want to be on top of the street. We want to be set back. And that's why we're knocking down that house, is we don't want to be that close to the road. We want to be set back off the lot. And, you know, it's our dream house and we can't wait to be there. We just have a couple little stepping stones to get over before we can make it happen.
Great. Thank you. Jess?
I don't have a problem with this.
I'm just disappointed it's not the other house that's coming down, because that's the one that's sitting in the street.
That was my grandparents' store.
Yeah.
Way back when.
All right. Well, with that being said, then, are there any members of the public who'd like to comment on this application? If so, either unmute yourself or use the raise hand tool. Okay, seeing none. Jess, I agree with you. I mean, you know, I don't really have any concerns with this. I think, you know, tying it to the occupancy permit, they're going to have to tear the house down to move in.
So make the conditions so we can make a motion then.
Sure. Do you guys want to condition it? Because, you know, I floated that as an option, but, you know, I feel fairly confident, but it's
due diligence to make the condition. I'm not sure how we would enforce it anyway, but Gibbons.
Well, I think that if you look at the application, you know, at least the condition that the house will come down prior to the issuance of the occupancy permit, you could use that language. And as I said, if you're inclined to put a drop dead date, so whichever occurs earlier, the issuance of or the completion of the house, or a date, I'm fine with that. But I think if you look at the application, that might help with some condition language.
Yeah, and if I could, Charlie would enforce the condition of the variance. That's the building commissioner would be doing that.
All right.
Okay, then we're splitting hairs.
And Ron, what do you think about this one?
Well, I'm just shocked how we got here in the first place. That piece of lot 1, but it's been approved. Somehow it happened. So I don't know. That original house shouldn't even be there. I mean, that made it so super unconforming but that's the way it is. So we'll just have to vote on this, and with a definite, time certain, or tie that demolition of that old house to maybe both the time certain and besides the construction, actual construction of the new house. I don't know. That's so complicated.
Yeah.
Mr. Chair, I think if we just condition it with that, as Attorney Gibbons suggested, with the language in the application, that no occupancy permit is granted on the new house until the old one is demolished, I think that solves all our problems. Does it not?
I mean, that's suffice for me, but I just want to make sure that the board is okay with that.
I'm okay with it.
Well, what protection we have that's ensconced in limbo, so the new house gets half constructed and a long period of time happens. So you're saying that they have to do this they have to put the shovel in the ground within a year.
Right.
But after that, can they just take their time and build a new house and retain the old house?
No, they want to move in.
Yeah, I
do.
know, I understand that desire, but
No, if they had a half-built structure on the parcel for, a certain amount of time, then we could go after, Charlie, the building commissioner could start doing zoning enforcement on the parcel.
all right. Okay.
All right, with that being said, then could I get a motion?
I make a motion. Let's see if I have it here. I make a motion to approve the application seeking variance on 37 Sandy Pond Road.
You know what, John? Let me just amend that if possible.
Mhm.
So we want to make sure that we include the occupancy permit language, and then if you actually, you know what, if you guys are okay with it, I could make a motion. Okay. I make a motion to approve a variance from sections 5.2.1.1, section 6.2 and 6.3b to allow for an existing single-family home to remain on the property located at 37 Sandy Pond Road until a new single-family home to be constructed on the property is complete, with the condition that the existing single-family home shall be removed prior to the issuance of an occupancy permit by the Town of Ayer building inspector for the to-be-constructed single-family home.
Second.
Okay. Ron DeFilippo,
Aye.
John Ellis,
Aye.
Jessica Gino,
Aye.
and Michael Gibbons, aye.
Thank you very much, board members. I appreciate it.
Yes,
Thank
thank
you.
you.
Thank you, everybody.
You're going to
All right.
love it. It's going to be beautiful. Wait and see.
We believe you.
Okay.
Thank you.
Could I get a motion to close the public hearing?
Motion to close the public hearing for 37 Sandy Pond Road.
Second.
Ron DeFilippo,
Aye.
John Ellis,
Aye.
Jessica Gino,
Aye.
and Michael Gibbons, aye. All right. Next item on the agenda is the continued public hearing application for a comprehensive permit, MGL 40B, sections 20 through 23, Neighborhood of Affordable Housing, Inc., 65 Fitchburg Road, filed June 24th, 2022. So with this one, we did get a number of documents from Green International Affiliates, who I believe are on the Zoom call.
Yes, I'm here.
Okay.
Jim Thorne from Green International, and Sergio Masto from Green International is here with me too.
And Jim and Sergio, was it your intention tonight to kind of go through these with the board? What was the plan?
Yeah, so we tried to give you our comments back with enough time that hopefully you could take a quick look through beforehand. And I guess we could go through any comments that you specifically want to discuss, or we could just kind of go through the comments that we feel that we need, board input. And one of the, I think I sent 2 PDFs. One PDF has all of our correspondence, which has all the comments in there. And the second PDF has the open comments. And we've highlighted the comments in 3 different colors. So there's yellow, red, and blue. The yellow comments, we feel that us and the applicant can continue to resolve those issues. They seem relatively minor and straightforward. And the red comments are comments that basically the applicant is seeking a waiver or basically asking if they can do at a later date. And then the blue comments are comments that, again, we need board input, but we might recommend a condition of approval that they might not need to address at this point, but can address for the final plans. So I'm happy to kind of go through the red and blue comments if you like, or go through the specific ones you'd like to discuss. Either way, I'll ask the board.
I think we might have you do both. But go ahead, John.
Can I jump in for a second?
Sure.
On the email that we got from I think it's James Thorne, it's stated that there was only 2 meetings budgeted for this process. And I assume our last Zoom meeting did not count as one of those meetings because nothing was discussed. It was they just kind of gave us the highlights of what was seen at the walkthrough, for which we already had the printout. So I'm just curious as to whether that was considered one of the billable meetings.
The question for Carly, I think.
I believe it was counted as one of the meetings. I'll defer to Jim, but.
Okay,
yes,
so
the
letter goes on to state that perhaps we shouldn't get into this tonight because there's still open issues that they need more detail on, and until they get that would be the second meeting. Otherwise, we're creating a third meeting.
So I was hoping we could resolve the red and blue issues where we need input from the board tonight. Where the yellow issues, we can work with the applicant offline, and I feel we can resolve us and the applicant offline, those comments, and we can report back to Carly that they've been addressed. So really the comments of concern for this meeting are the red and blue ones. If we can resolve those tonight, then I would even recommend a condition of approval that, I would recommend that, the applicant might get a condition of approval and upon the fact that the applicant can resolve the yellow issues offline with us, so that it doesn't need, so we don't need to have another meeting or continuing going back and forth to kind of keep the process moving forward. This is an approach we've done with other towns. Is that if there's open comments.
This was your suggestion. You said that it might be worth bumping to the next hearing date, so we have a bit of discussion. So I was just basing it on that letter.
I did say that, and I said if the board didn't have time to review the comments beforehand and felt that we could adequately discuss the comments, then I said we could bump the meeting to the next meeting to have a good conversation.
And then we would make sure that another hearing would be mutually agreed upon by the applicant and with Green before we proceeded with it.
So I don't know. I don't know what the board thinks, but I don't know if we should do this now or if we should wait until they have the rest of the information and we go through it one time and get it done.
No. If I could make a recommendation, so what they're saying is the yellow comments, those can be done between the applicant's engineer and the peer review engineer. We are the peer review engineer that the town, hired through the funds provided by NOAA. They are looking for direction from the board tonight, which I had to put in the packet information on the red and the blue comments on that document. So if we might go through those tonight, at least we can start the discussion and see where we end up.
I agree. Jim, why don't you start going through some of those comments?
Okay, so I'll start.
Jim, do you want to screen share or do you need me to do that?
Yeah, I can screen share. No problem. Actually, I'm disabled from screen sharing.
Oh, wait, hold on. Give me 2 seconds. You should be all set.
Okay. Okay, let me know if you can see my screen.
Yep.
Okay, great.
There.
So like I said, the yellow comments, we can skip this for now. This is we're basically requesting additional traffic details. And then I guess I'll open it up to, Taylor, do you feel that this can be addressed offline, or do you feel like this needs to be discussed tonight?
Are you talking about comment 8A?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have our traffic engineer with us. We have done this background research already based on this comment. Sam, or Knowles may want to respond to this, but I think yes, we can answer this easily.
Okay.
So that's not going to be an issue for the board?
Not tonight.
So we're coming back to this.
So I think this is something that we can handle offline. The next one is, so there are, a list of waivers. So we just wanted to say, we've acknowledged the waivers. The waivers seem pretty straightforward. I think the applicant did a good job of saying what waivers that they're not meeting and what waivers they're requesting and how they're not meeting it. So we're going to defer to the board for, all of the waiver requests that were initially submitted.
So anytime I see this waiver on this list, has it actually been put on the waiver list already, or is this something you're suggesting to add to the waiver list?
I don't think Taylor and his group have put all of these waivers on the original waiver or on the waiver list.
So Jim, just to interrupt, the document that Carly sent us, John, at right as the meeting was getting ready to kick off, it looked like an updated waiver list, and so maybe no one can speak to that.
And if Stephanie, I know she's online, she can speak to that. I can share the document when it's appropriate.
Okay. I just wanted to know if they were already on there, or if we had to keep track of them and put them on there at a future date.
If I could briefly respond to that, just to clarify for everybody. The waiver list was pretty much everything was on there. There were a few relative to parking space width for the parallel parking space, and then a couple on the stormwater that were additional from what had been submitted with the application. And so what I did today to help ease the conversation and the board's review is the updated list that I sent today. I highlighted the ones that were not on the waiver list at the time of filing the application. And they're consistent with what Jim has pointed out on his. If it wasn't already on our waiver list and we'd indicated we would request it, I just did a double check to make certain that the two documents meshed. So so
they were on there.
Stated, yep, and they're highlighted so you can see what is different from the original. Mm-hmm.
That's good.
Could I ask, will we be voting on waivers tonight, or is that something we'd be doing at, say, the next meeting?
I don't think so, Jess. Carly, that's correct, right?
And do waivers require a supermajority or just a simple majority?
That's a good question.
We'll let Paul answer that.
Every vote is a simple majority on a comprehensive permit. There's no supermajority requirements.
Okay.
Great. All right, Jim, if you want to keep going.
On to the next one. So 20/20A. This is in regards to the neighboring property. So I'll show the site plans right now. So as you can see, this black line is the property line right here. There's a neighboring property where the parking lot encroaches over here into the applicant's parcel. So we just had a comment about, has there been any coordination with the neighboring property? And it basically sounded like the applicant was saying the current landowner is going to handle removal of the pavement within the property limits. And we just wanted to make sure that that was called out on the plans, that it would be done prior to the project, or if it actually is being part of the project, it should be shown on this set of plans and should include, erosion control going around it and, be permitted as part of this plan. So if it is being proposed or removed by the current landowner, then our question was, has there been any plans being submitted with that removal? Because it's within the buffer zone as well.
And I could say conservation has not had anything submitted from the current landowner.
If I may, this is Taylor Dowdy with BSC Group. If it's okay, if I could jump in here. We have had a couple of discussions with our project team and NOAA about this area, and they are working with the brokers now to discuss with the current landowner exactly how this may happen, et cetera, et cetera. I think for simplicity's sake, it may be easiest if we just show this particular removal of the pavement on NOAA's property on our plans. If we show it and go ahead and get it permitted all at once, both through this comprehensive permit and eventually when we do file the notice of intent. That way there's no confusion. And then it will be up to NOAA and the seller of the property to determine how that's negotiated within the land deal itself, if that makes sense. So in other words, to make a long story short, we're going to end up showing it on the work on our plan.
I agree with that approach too. It seems like the simplest approach, but I'll leave that up to the board.
So to handle, we could put in a condition of, you indicate a condition of approval. So if this was going to be included on the NOAA project, then this would be one of those things we would do a condition of approval, that it goes through the proper channels with removal in a buffer zone.
Yeah, I think the easiest, if I may, I think the easiest way is just to have a condition that says, on the final plan, this particular work will be shown.
Okay. Just in terms of transfer of ownership of that property, when it's sold, would the condition of accepting the ownership be that that's already been removed? The pavement?
I don't want to, I'll let Stephanie perhaps answer that, but it's hard to envision how NOAA can get on the property to do work without control of the property, would be my first thought.
Okay.
Right. I think that there's not authority for NOAA to do work on the property until it holds the property itself. So.
Okay, on to the next question, next comment. So the next comment is relative to ADA and MAAB, like making parking and walkways and building entrances accessible. So the plans right now are, preliminary plans. They do show grading. It's relatively schematic, but they do have a note on the plans that indicates that they will meet all ADA requirements. It's pretty typical to not have a full detailed grading plan at this point. So they said that by their final construction documents, they will have a finalized grading plan showing that they meet the requirements. So I recommend that this would be a condition of approval.
Okay.
So how does that come about? When you say it should be a condition of approval, who manages that? Where does this go?
Mike, if
Yeah.
Mike,
I can jump in to answer that question.
Thank you, Paul.
So at the end of this process, this board is going to issue a very detailed decision. That decision is going to contain numerous conditions. And once the decision has been issued, a number of those conditions will relate to information that has to be submitted as part of the final plans.
Okay, so that'll be written into the final plan.
Correct. So
okay.
The requirement will be written into the decision that they submit final plans that include this information. And then those will be reviewed prior to the time that building permits will be issued.
Okay, I'm just trying to keep track of what the ZBA has to follow, but this is going to show up at that point.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so then on to the next few. So 23, 25, and 26. These are all basically bylaws that they have put on the waiver list. So, you know, such as the first one is no parking space should be 10 feet within a lot line. So they have less than that. And then the next one is they don't meet the required amount of parking spaces based on what they have for bedroom units based off the zoning bylaw and the Institute of Transportation Engineering General Manual. And then the last one is the project is within 3 different zoning districts, and they don't meet the setback requirements based off of the zoning district that it's within, but they do if you kind of, you know, make them all together, which is kind of confusing. So they don't meet the setback for side and front for general business and light industry, but they do meet it if it was considered residence A2. But it is a residential building, so you know, this could be acceptable. Also keep in mind that this is a 40B project, so these are waivers that they could seek as well.
Stephanie, were these waivers added to the updated waiver list that you submitted?
Yes, Paul, they were. So basically, just for confirmation, kind of the front of the property is that general business, light industrial, and then the back side is the A2. And so the kind of the front facing units are in that. And so we've clarified and updated the waiver list to make certain that we have included the setback for front and side for those.
Perfect. Thank you.
Okay, and then on to the next one. So 33/33A. So the FEMA floodline on the plans it's based off of GIS. So it's very approximate. It's not based off the actual elevation. But the applicant did note that there is no flood study for this area. So they don't have a readily available flood elevation to use for their calculations. So in order to figure out where the actual 100-year floodplain line is at what elevation, they would have to do a flood study, which is, and as the applicant noted, it is a significant amount of work to kind of figure that out. But the main reason why I noted this is because they are filling within the buffer zones and near the wetland line. So the wetland lines along here, and they have some fill with the retaining wall in this portion of the project. So anytime you fill within a flood zone, you're required to provide compensatory flood storage. But this might be out of scope for the ZBA board and more of a Conservation Commission item. But I just wanted to, make everyone aware of this.
If I could, I'm sorry, Ms. Cugino, you go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, is this a question, you say defer to the Conservation Commission, would the appropriate time to answer this particular question be when the notice of intent is submitted, or should this be something that's answered sooner?
I am perfectly willing to answer it sooner in that the details on this are that there is a flood study within this. This line does show up on the flood study maps. That's where we pulled the flood line from. Jim is correct in saying that the actual details and the cross sections that are contained within the Middlesex County flood study do not have elevations for this area. Some areas of flood zones have elevations associated with it, some do not. In this case, in this particular area, there is no elevation associated with this flood line. And so you have to go, and FEMA even says this, you have to go off the best information available. And the best information available that we have at this time is the line that's directly on the FEMA flood map, and that's what we're using. We're not filling a flood zone. We're not showing filling within a flood zone. And we did use the best information that's available today on the FEMA flood maps.
I'll leave it up to the board, but I think it'll be more of a concern for the Conservation Commission because it's within the buffer zone. It's a Wetland Protection Act kind of rule.
So, Jim, I would just ask you then, do you think that's something that should be answered now while we're in this process with ZBA, or could that be answered at a later date when a notice of intent is filed by the Conservation Commission?
I think it's ultimately the Conservation Commission's call, so it will be addressed within the within the NOI.
Okay, so it can be deferred till then.
I just wanted to start the discussion now. Should I move on to the next?
Please, yep.
Okay. So the next one is 36A. And our comment was about sewer peak flows. So the applicant basically said that there's ongoing coordination between them and the DPW to make sure that the DPW system has capacity for all this extra flow from the new complex. So
yeah, sorry.
I was just going to say I recommend a condition of approval that that gets figured out by the time the end of the project.
And so, Jim, when you say gets figured out, I assume you're meaning that the DPW is confirmed that it can handle the additional flows, right? I mean,
yeah, that's correct.
Okay.
That DPW confirms that it can handle the flows from this project.
And just to be perfectly clear, I know the DPW director is on the call tonight. We did email Dan that information actually today in terms of the number of bedrooms, which is an easy calculation to then convert that to sewer flows. Dan did indicate that the sewer line that we are tying into is, I want to say it's a 36-inch line, or maybe it was 24. But he did indicate during our site walk that we had back in September that line has plenty of capacity to handle this particular development.
Dan, do you want to comment on that?
Yeah, sorry. I did receive the email today. I haven't looked at it closely, but I don't anticipate it to be an issue, but I do have to go through the calculations and make sure we're good. So I'll work with Taylor offline on that.
Great. Thank you.
Sounds good. Thanks, Dan.
And then next one is 39. So this is basically how is the water main for the complex going to connect into the town's water main in the street. It wasn't exactly clear on the plans whether it's a tapping sleeve or valve or cut in T. Tapping sleeve and valve, they tap in on a live line, so there's no shutdown. Where cut in T, they have to do a shutdown. Just making sure that that is being coordinated with the water department, and the water department has confirmed their approach.
Yeah, I think if I can add my 2 cents to this, as part of the email that we sent to Dan today, we did include a utility plan showing the water line within the right of way and showing the connection. And I think Dan would agree. We will be working with them to confirm methodology of how we tap the line and go from there.
Yeah, this is Dan. That's correct. I did get that email, and I'll take a look. I'll review it, but we will coordinate with Taylor. I don't really see this being much of an issue.
Great, thanks.
And then the next comment is relative to the hydrants, just making sure that those are coordinated with the fire and water department. And so that basically the last 3 comments are just kind of all recommends condition of approval, make sure that each department has confirmed that they agree with how the plans are laid out associated with fire, water. And then, so the next set of comments, see a lot of red from 50 to 64. Essentially, we did not receive revised landscape plans, and their responses to all of our comments in the landscape plans were pretty much that they accept our recommendation and they will include it in the final, final construction plans. So, my question to the board is, would you like to have this information on the plans now for us to review, or would you like to condition approval that the landscape plans get updated with our recommendation?
I mean, personally, I think Paul, go ahead.
I'm sorry, I was just coughing.
Oh, okay. Well, personally, I think I'd prefer to have you all take a look at the plans. I mean, we can look at them, but truly, you're the experts on this. What does everybody else think?
I think that's good. I mean, having Green International look at revised plans.
Correct, yeah.
Yeah, I did have a couple questions on, one was talking about removal of trees within the buffer zone. And is that just in the area where the retaining wall is going to go, in that back corner?
Which comment does this refer to, perhaps?
57.
57.
Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah, so this I think this comment, Green was looking for a more diverse species of trees to be replaced to mitigate some removal of trees.
Okay.
And I believe the recommendation has been accepted, and we will provide some greater diversity of trees within the site to promote biodiversity.
Okay.
Right, and if I may, kind of with this block of proposed comments,
yep.
If you kind of walk your way through them, a number of them are. So there was an updated sheet L100, and it's just sheets L200 and 300 weren't submitted to catch up. So a lot of that is just kind of a blanket that the final plans will reflect the changes as shown on sheet L100. So there's just that catch-up condition that I don't think requires any sort of new submittal. And then kind of the same is with the handicap parking spaces. It's shown actually on our civil plans sheet, I think A or C103, excuse me. So it's just a matter again of matching the plans, which we would do when we're submitting our final plans, obviously. Again, coordinating the limit of work at the rear of the site, civil and the landscaping. So it looks like there's not it looks like there's a lot, but there's actually not. It's just making certain that the plans all speak together. And when you submit revised plans, it's typical that you don't submit a full set of all new plans, but you show where the changes are, and then those changes are carried through all of the other plans. And obviously that would be picked up and reviewed during the review of the final plans for consistency with the decision. And then if I could, and I think Frank's on the line as well, but we did reach out with the landscape architect to talk about kind of diversity. And my proposal would be that at the final plans we submit and we provide the number and the types. There's a recommendation of about 4 different tree species to provide some diversity and 4 different shrub species. Frank, are you on? Would you like to speak to that? Maybe Frank's not on.
Okay. All right, board members, any other questions on this sort of this block of comments?
No.
Okay, Jim, then why don't we move on to the next set? I think it's number 69.
Well, 65 comes next, which is a waiver on building height.
Oh, there we go.
That's
65.
not in the same block. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. 65 is the waiver on building height. And this was actually part of the original waivers that they sent. So we probably didn't need to reiterate it here on our comments. So I'll move on to the next one. So the next one is snow storage. So we had a comment that they should show snow storage locations on the plans to make sure that there's no additional loss of parking, since they're already requesting a waiver for reduced parking. And then we also wanted to make sure that they didn't impact the wetlands at all. So they added snow storage to the plans, but the location was within the buffer zone, and it was in this area, which is within the buffer zone and upgrading it to the wetland and intermediate stream. So we made a comment to revise the location of the storage, but ultimately we kind of defer, since it's within the buffer zone, we defer if, the Conservation Commission is okay with that. So it might be beyond the ZBA review and more of the Conservation Commission review. But we did want to state that since we did notice that.
And just to be clear, this is Taylor again. We're definitely willing to identify other snow storage areas on site that are away from the buffer zone. I do recognize that that's typically towns would prefer not to see snow storage within those areas. So it does make sense to identify other areas, and obviously the management company would be very sensitive about pushing snow into prime parking spaces. So we can look for other areas to store snow.
That would be great, because I'm concerned about the loss of parking in the winter, especially where, one of the things we talked about earlier was having fewer parking spots than the town bylaws require. So,
and can I just ask, when you talk about a final plan that should include a lot of these updated details, when does the final plan get submitted? Is that part of our ZBA process in the immediate timetable that we're looking at, or is that down the line?
That's a post-approval submittal. So what the board is approving when it grants the comprehensive permit is these preliminary plans that you have seen and have been under review. And then after the permit is issued, there'll be a condition that requires a submittal of final plans prior to the applicant submitting a building permit application. And those final plans will have all of the detailed information that still needs to be submitted. You'll review that, make sure that it's consistent with both the approved plans and the conditions that were imposed as part of the decision.
Okay, and then I sorry I keep harping on this, but just getting the coordination of this dance with some of the items having to go before the Conservation Commission under the Wetland Protection Act. Do changes to, say, the final plan based on that meeting with the Conservation Commission have any effect? Or
well, it could. I mean, if, for instance, they're showing snow storage on the plans, that are approved by the board, and the Conservation Commission does not issue an order of conditions allowing those snow storage areas, then the applicant would be at risk of having to come back to this board and request a modification of its decision to allow new locations for snow storage. It's not unusual at all. I don't think I've been involved in a lot of 40D developments that haven't at some point or another had to come back to the board for minor modifications.
Okay, it's just that coordination dance I was been concerned about. Yep, thank you.
Welcome.
Or if I may as well, sometimes boards would impose a condition that say that there's to be snow storage provided on the site, subject to the commission's approval of the notice of intent, and that, to ensure that no parking spaces shall be lost due to snow storage. Yep. And that gives a little bit more flexibility because you've approved snow storage subject to the order of conditions that the Concom would issue under the Act, but you've also clarified that, in any event, there will be no loss to parking spaces.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so the next comment is, so the stormwater system proposes recharge to groundwater. Part of the Ayer stormwater regulations, it states that a percolation test shall be performed. And the applicant basically said that they would obtain a percolation test prior to the building permit to confirm the infiltration rates being used. So the applicant has used, the Rawls rate for infiltration rates, which is a well-known practice that, we use in engineering all the time. So I feel that their approach is fine. It makes sense. And I recommend a condition of approval that they do, actually perform the tests prior to the building permit. Okay, on to the next one. So the next one is a stormwater regulation, an Ayer stormwater regulation. So in the regulations, it says to use the EPA tool for pollutant removal. And the applicant didn't use the tool. This goes above and beyond TSS removal. It accounts for other pollutants such as nitrogen, phosphorus, and zinc. I just wanted to bring this to the board's attention because basically they requested a waiver to not use the tool because they are meeting the 1 inch requirement, and they are meeting the 1 inch requirement, which in the Ayer stormwater standards, it does say that it needs to meet a certain pollutant removal or meet the 1 inch. I was a little confused by how the regulations worked, but so I wanted to just kind of state it because I found it. I wasn't sure if someone from the board knew more about this regulation, I guess.
If I could jump in here, Jim, if that's okay. Your read of the regulations was kind of the same as my read. If I read it, it was an and/or that if you provided 1 inch, then you didn't necessarily have to do the other option, and that's kind of how we took it.
Dan, can you comment on that?
Yeah, and that's what Taylor just said is what what we were going for when we made the regulation. So it's an and or. So if you have the 1 inch, you're all set.
Great, thank you.
Okay, great. So we can close out that comment because they do meet the 1 inch. So another regulation was it states that drainage swales shall accommodate the 25-year storm and velocities below 4 feet per second. There's a drainage swale along the back of the building over here. The applicant did not perform calculations for the 25-year storm. Essentially, the response said that there's minimal amount of water directed towards this area. So, doing the calculation isn't really necessary. So I wanted to, go for it.
Sorry, Jim, to jump in here. We're not really this is a classic example of a building and then a parking lot, and we're not directing any water from the parking lot or other areas to the swale. It's literally just a method to not have water drain into the podium parking. And to be honest, when we graded it out like this, I didn't even look at it as a swale. I just looked at it as a low point to make sure that the water, as it fell there, would then go down towards the parking lot and then be captured within our stormwater system itself.
So I agree. It captures very minimal area. The roof actually does not go into the swale, which would, if the roof was going to the swale, then I think absolutely the calculation should be done. But since it's just the grass area behind the building, my opinion is it's probably not necessary. But since it was a standard, I felt necessary to bring it up to the board, whether the board feels like the calculation should be done or not.
And just to clarify for the board, that is included in our updated waiver list.
Great, thank you.
Okay. That's the next one. So 92/92A, kind of similar to comments 39 and 39A. It's basically just understanding how the connection to the main and the street is going to work. We suggested potentially putting 2 gate valves on, utility plan. We suggested putting 2 gate valves on either side of the main to limit shutdowns to the complex, since it is a very large complex. But that will need to be coordinated with the water and DPW department.
Yeah, we can work with the water department on that to figure out the best path forward.
And then, so the last one is 99A. So we had a question if there's any exterior building lighting. And that has not been added to the plans yet, or has been coordinated. And basically our response back was, in order to fully assess the photometrics lighting plan, we need to, for us to do our full review of it, we do need to include the building mountain lighting if that is going to be added to the plan at a later date.
I tend to agree. Taylor, is that something you guys can provide?
I'm going to defer to, actually, Frank is not on the line. Frank did the lands. Go ahead, Stephanie.
If I could jump in quickly, and then Taylor, you can tell me if I've said something incorrect on this one.
Sure.
So the photometric plan, typically you're worried kind of about the lighting from parking lots, so you don't have light spill onto adjacent properties. And at this point, the plans are still at a preliminary level, and so the lighting directly around the building will be designed to ensure safe access and exit for the persons entering and exiting the building. And I think that that's more something that you would see at the design or the construction design stage versus the here. We will make certain, obviously, that any mounted lights to the building, that they're compliant with kind of the recommended, I think it's a 5-foot candle of light levels that you typically use. But we think that it's a more appropriate consideration at the kind of at the construction design stage for that.
Yeah, I think to add on to that, that's exactly what Frank and I and Stephanie discussed earlier today, was that, the site lighting will have full cutoff features so that you don't have light trespass over property lines. And obviously any building lighting that's provided, I think Frank mentioned that it would be geared towards specifically lighting the building entrances and exits for safety purposes. And that's directed directly at those entrances rather than, broadcast and spread out over a wide area.
Jim, do you commonly review these photometric, reflex lighting? Do you usually, go through this when you're doing peer reviews, or is this something that is often included in the, like they're saying, that the final plans?
So I'm not a lighting designer, so understanding all the photometrics is a little over my head. Mm-hmm. So I don't have an answer for you tonight, but I can go back to my lighting designer in the house and who made the comment and follow up with you on that.
Okay. All right. So based on the document I have, that's page 6 of 6, and the last of the blue or red comments. Board members, do you have any other questions tonight for Jim, Taylor, or Stephanie?
I do not.
Okay. So, Paul, I actually have a question. So, kind of to piggyback on John's comment earlier in the discussion. So we have the blue line is condition of approval, the red is defer to board, yellow is open comments. At tonight's meeting, what's really being asked of us? Are we expected to make any kind of vote? To allow Green International and BSC to do anything? What's expected of tonight's meeting?
I don't think that you have to take any sort of vote at tonight's meeting. If there were any of the pink shaded comments for board discussion that you have concerns with, then you should discuss them tonight. But leaving that aside, you do not have to make any definitive decisions tonight. That ultimately that's going to be the process of drafting a decision, discussing that decision, and making a determination at that point.
Okay, thank you.
Welcome.
And if I may kind of comment in hopes that this is helpful to the board members.
Sure.
As I see kind of how Green did this, how they set it up with the color coding system, it's very straightforward. I know it doesn't look that way because it's a big document, but their green and their red, the blue and the red, the blue were the ones with the proposed condition of approval. And so I think that when the board gets to the point where they're going to draft the decision, they may want to say, okay, we're going to incorporate that as a written condition of approval. And I think in most instances, we've already commented whether or not we would, we agree that that's, an appropriate type of condition. And then for the red ones that were just for the board's consideration, I think actually a lot of those can be converted to, if the board has a question, it's just a condition of approval to say that the final plans shall show this, or, prior to making application for building permits, coordination, with DPW and fire department for location of hydrants and whatnot, will move forward. So they're all actually very resolvable. There's no big issues that I see. There's no big design flaws, which is a great thing to see when you see a peer review. There's no design flaws. It's just, I think, tweaks or minor points that most of them can be in a condition of approval. And then with the yellow, those were just all kind of, if there's an open question that Green had that just requires the engineers or the architects or whatever to have a discussion with one another and kind of say, okay, I understand, why this is or why this isn't. There's not an issue there. And I think just if I can circle back to the suggestion that the applicant should submit kind of a new set of multi-sheet landscaping plans. I think that also can be baked into conditions of approval, what the landscaping plans should consider before they are submitted final. And maybe that's just something that we have an offline discussion with first with Green or the professionals talk to one another to kind of move forward towards that rather than to have like an elongated process because I don't think the board wants to keep having back and forth hearings, but you just kind of want to know that an issue has been resolved and closed out by the peer review.
That's certainly how I feel.
Mike, I do have one question.
Sure.
Okay, would be with respect to condition 8. I know it's in the yellow, but my question, this is the issue of whether there ought to be a traffic light at Fitchburg Road and Groton School Road. And I know the recommendation is to put one in, but how does that get resolved given everybody acknowledges the Mass DOT improvements are dormant and have been for a number of years?
That's a great question. Taylor or Dan, I think I defer to you fellas.
I might defer to our traffic engineer, Sam, who is on this call.
Okay. Yeah, so my name is Sam of Ado, and I think the comment is not asking for a traffic light per se, but it's saying that post-occupancy should do a warrant analysis. But I think we should understand that this is a DOT roadway, and also we did respond to this comment that we had gone there to look at the traffic operations, and we looked at the queues and the vehicles that were kind of queuing up at that location, and maybe 2 or 3 vehicles every time coming down Groton School Road. The maximum that we saw were about 6 vehicles. And when you have an intersection like this that has no light, you can have 1 vehicle sit there that can show up in the analysis as having a long delay, but in actual life experience, it's not like a vehicle sitting there for 2 minutes, 3 minutes. So we did respond to that, and the light, as I said, it's definitely a bigger picture, because if you look at the traffic study, this project will be adding about 2 vehicles an hour during the morning and 5 vehicles an hour in the evening coming down Groton School Road. And that it's not the source of a trigger for traffic light at this location. And I think we gave that response in the current round of responses that we have provided.
Right, and to kind of piggyback on Sam's comment there, I think I look back at my notes. We had talked about that in the August 17th meeting, and I know that Green wasn't there for that, but Sam had explained that after they did the traffic study, they actually sent somebody back out to the site to see. And so the delays in reality were not like as notable as what the delays just on the modeling that was used. Did I state that correctly, Sam?
That's correct.
Yeah.
Great. So would you be opposed to doing the post-occupancy monitoring or conducting a traffic signal warrant analysis?
I think this is a DOT question. It's a mass DOT intersection. And if you look at the level of traffic you'll be adding, I think you'll be asking a lot of the project. If you're adding 5 vehicles, let's say, to that coming down the school road, so that's what I'm saying. You just have to look at it. It's a matter of scale, but I'll leave that to the applicant. It's a matter of scale.
Okay.
So in relation to that, there was talk of crosswalks. What is the status of those, or is that further into the meeting process that we're going to get into that?
So I think the crosswalk, or maybe Taylor, you can respond to that.
Yeah, we're not proposing any crosswalks at this time because it is a DOT road. We are, however, as part of the project, we are showing a sidewalk along this particular property's frontage, but there's no crosswalks proposed in this particular case.
Yeah, but that you have a sidewalk in front of the property, but it's going to kind of dead end. It needs to connect to the sidewalks on the other side of the street at some point.
I hear what you're saying, and the points noted. I would note that we don't necessarily have control of other properties up and down the road. It is a DOT controlled road, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay, so let me rephrase the question.
Okay.
If the board is interested in promoting a crosswalk, how is that going to be done? Is that going to be our highway department having to work with the DOT? How can we make that a possibility?
Yeah, I would say it's a DOT process, and putting a crosswalk there would have to be looked at, the way people speed on that roadway. So just putting a crosswalk there without any advance warning sign, you'll be putting people crossing that section in jeopardy, and DOT will have to look at it from a safety perspective. So the DPW definitely will be the ones to work with DOT about the installing a crosswalk at that location.
Because, you know, I would go for a crosswalk where they have a button to push and the lights flash and the people are going to cross. A lighted crosswalk, I guess, is the terminology or whatever.
Like we have on East Main Street, John?
Yeah, you have one on East Main. You have one down there by the gym coming from Harvard Road or whatever it is to go by the gym. And that has hardly, I mean, that's not really a pedestrian issue there. But I guess that's just a stop sign. That's not a crosswalk.
Right. But we do have them right by Pauline's on East Main. They did put in a system like that. So I know what you're talking about.
And I think that would be appropriate for here.
Yeah, I think my concern would be that just because it's a DOT property on the road, just a little bit concerned that some things are just pushed to the side for now and it becomes a problem for the town to have to resolve with DOT in the future.
Yeah, can I speak? This is Dan.
Please, Dan.
Yeah, so you're right. It's a DOT jurisdiction road. So that conversation would be, from what I understand, between the applicant and DOT. So if that was a requirement of the board for an offsite improvement, they would have to coordinate with DOT for whatever DOT's requirements are for that crosswalk to make it safe, like you were talking about with an RRFB, et cetera. So that's the way I understand it.
So you would want that coordination to be going on now?
Yeah, that's what I would think. If if it becomes part of this plan, I mean, I know usually, from what I understand, the 40Bs are approved and then a permit. The applicants go for a permit with the DOT for the access to the road and any other improvements on DOT's road. So I don't know if maybe it would happen later, but and it's kind of a requirement of the plan to have that offsite improvement, and it just has to be worked out with DOT. I'm not sure, but it wouldn't. The DPW typically wouldn't be involved, from what I understand, because it's DOT's road.
Okay.
So it's back to the applicant to work with the DOT to make that happen?
The tension there is that you can't condition, the board can't condition another permit when it's in the issuing authority of a state authority. You can't require us to get that if they're not going to issue it.
Can we require you to apply for it?
I think that you can require the applicant to work with DOT to explore whether or not they would issue an approval for a sidewalk. Attorney Kiefer is right that you can't condition the project on the applicant actually being able to install the sidewalk when that may be out of their ability to do.
Okay. Jess, does that satisfy your question?
Yeah,
okay,
that clarifies a lot.
Perfect. All right, anybody have any other questions about what we've gone over? Do we have any members of the public who have any questions about anything discussed tonight? Okay, seeing none. Paul, what are our next steps here, if you don't mind?
Well, it sounds like there still needs to be some back and forth between your peer reviewer and the applicant's engineering team. So that would happen prior to the next meeting. I think at this point, we're probably ready for me to begin drafting a decision. I think we're better off discussing that draft decision during an open public meeting rather than closing the hearing and then having that discussion, because then you can't get any feedback from the applicant or from the public once you've closed the public hearing. So to the extent we can get that decision drafted and discussed during an open meeting, it's the best approach.
Okay, we're proposing our next meeting to be November, tentatively right now, November 30th. Is that something that you could begin drafting prior to then, or would you prefer to go later into the December meeting?
I would, yeah, I'm going to need more time than that.
Plus,
okay, what's a realistic?
Do we have to vote on the waivers before you start drafting, or?
Well, no, the draft decision will include all of the waivers, and
okay.
The way I usually draft it, just to save myself some time, is I include some suggested determinations from the board. That doesn't mean that you're required to follow whatever determinations I suggest, but generally they are the sort of waivers that are necessary for the project to move forward. I'm presuming that the board is going to want me to move forward with the draft approval with conditions. So I would presume, that the waiver requests that are necessary for the project to be allowed to move forward would be approved. But you'll obviously have the opportunity to review all of that and provide your own feedback.
So does the board have to have any discussion for the items that were marked to be determined by the ZBA, other than waivers which have been put on the waivers list? What action items are we looking for so you can do your draft?
I mean, I can go back and look. I think that there was already discussion on a lot of those areas tonight. And some of them, were somewhat nondescript. Looking at the first one, the applicant is seeking many waivers. We defer the board for approval on waiver requests. Well, we'll address that, when we go over the draft decision. I don't think that there's necessarily any specific action unless you have some sort of concerns with any one of these items. I don't think that I necessarily need any feedback from you to at least to prepare a draft decision. And then
okay, so
we're going to go through that decision, and you can let me know if there's anything missing or if there's anything you disagree with, and we go from there.
Okay, so everything ZBA related is either going to be in your draft or already put on the waivers list, and we just wait to take the next step.
Right, and as we've gone through that tonight, I've been writing down the things that do need to be addressed in the conditions, so they will all be in the draft decision.
So would it be fair to say that at our next meeting, which is November 30th, we're just going to be taking up the Nasoya issue, and then we can start reviewing the draft decision at our December 21st meeting?
I'll definitely have you the draft before then. I'll try to have it to you by December 7th so that there's 2 weeks for the board to review it, for the applicant to review it, provide any comments that they may have.
Okay, that sounds
a much more productive meeting.
Agreed. So that sounds good to me. The ZBA, does that sound good to you, Mike and others?
It's fine by me.
So can we not have the 30th and move that other to the 7th as well? Or
yes.
No, so we've already continued the meeting to November 30th for Nasoya, so we have to have that meeting.
Well, I mean, you could, if you got in touch with the applicant, just have the meeting and simply open it and immediately continue it to the 7th if you wanted to.
I think if everybody's still able, we do the meeting on the 30th, just because, it'll allow us the most time in our December meeting to discuss this. And I think Paul when he referenced the 7th, he mentioned that he would have the draft to the board and to the applicant, but we're going to need time to review this. And
and so also there's already 2 other public hearings for December. So if we can knock out the Nasoya one, I'd rather do that in November.
Okay.
And we'll just be meeting that one time, December 21st in December. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So Paul, my final question is, we're hopefully going to receive the draft decision in early December and review it. At our meeting on the 21st, is that the appropriate time to discuss, any concerns over waivers that have been requested? So
yes,
okay.
That is when that discussion should be held. We'll be discussing the conditions that are being proposed as well as the waiver decisions, and wherever you want to go with those, we'll address it at that point in time. I definitely would make sure you're giving yourself plenty of time for that hearing, because I can't tell you the last time I had a decision that was less than 20 pages. Sometimes they're significantly longer. This probably doesn't need to be as long as all that, but these decisions are lengthy, and you're going to want. There's a number of standard conditions that that aren't going to require a ton of review, but you're going to want to go through one by one and ask the board members, do you have any concerns with condition 1, condition 2, and so forth. So it's going to take some time on the 21st.
Okay.
And I would think that we'll start, because we do have 2 other hearings that night. We'll do like we did tonight, do those first, and then we'll start this discussion, and then we can look to be scheduling, another meeting in January prior to the 18th if needs be, just to keep the discussion on the decision going.
Okay. All right, great. Then,
Stephanie, does that sound good? Fair to you?
That's fine with me. I'll ask Phil or Annika, who I think are both on the call, if that works with their scheduling.
I'll defer to Phil. My schedule's a little bit more flexible than his is.
He's on anymore.
Yeah, I don't know if we've lost Phil.
Do you want to just repeat that date and time so I have it correct, and I'll send him a message.
It would be December 21st, and probably I would say like 6:15 p.m.
Okay.
It'll likely start later than that, but I'd rather not have to wait around.
Yeah, I will. I'll send him a text message and see if I can get a response back in the next 2 minutes.
okay, that being said, would we want to continue this public hearing to December 21st at 6 p.m.? Carly, does that work?
I would say 6:15 because you already have 2 scheduled.
Okay. Does that work for everybody?
Yep.
All right. Can I get a motion?
Motion to continue this public hearing for review of Ayer Commons to December 21st.
At 6:15 p.m.
At 6:15 p.m.
Via Zoom.
Via Zoom.
Second.
All right. Ron DeFilippo.
Aye.
John Ellis.
Aye.
Jessica Gino.
Aye.
And Michael Gibbons. Aye.
Okay, so
thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you for the time this evening.
Good night.
Go ahead, Carly.
So our next meeting will be November 30th at 6 to deal with the Soya public hearing. So Sam will get that agenda posted. We'll work on that tomorrow, Sam, and then we'll take it from there. And then we'll see you on November 30th. So wishing everyone a very happy Thanksgiving holiday.
You as well. And can we just get a motion to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Ron DeFilippo.
Aye.
John Ellis.
Aye.
Jessica Gino.
Aye.
And Mike Gibbons, aye. Thank you, everybody. Have a great night.